Donde Plowman's response. Caleb, help me fill this out so we can make sure the listeners are aware. But I know Jimmy is. They question the morality of the NCAA. They question how they could be an exemplary program in terms of how they govern themselves. And now they're suddenly under investigation again. They question the NCAA's ability, which we all have, about handling NIL and how behind the curve they were. I mean, for goodness sake, my son and I are just getting the NCAA football game back, and I think he was 5 the last time we played it, and that's part of NIL. So anything else before I get to Jimmy on this very strong response about the letter sent to the NCAA from Donde Plowman, the chancellor, that we need to know about? Anything that stood out there to you, Caleb?
Donde Plowman, in a letter to the NCAA, and it was a response to Charlie Baker, openly called the NCAA morally wrong, effectively called them a failure, and has gone. I don't know if she went for Jimmy. You could tell me, but I got the vibe that she sent this letter out of a desire for positive clicks on Twitter from Tennessee fans and the standing ovation she got last night at Thompson Bowling Arena more than anything else.
Oh, okay, Jim, I'm going to kick it to you, but I'm going to take it a bit further. This is historic. Tennessee always complies, turns stuff over, comply. And you can jump on our poll question for the day. It's on the YouTube page, and now it's pretty one-sided. What do you think of Donde Plowman fighting back against the NCAA? Go get it, they're weak. Comply has no effect. 95% say go get it, they're weak. 5% say it has no effect. Nobody has said just comply. Jimmy, I don't think that people truly understand how different this approach has been from Tennessee over the past 50 years. That letter to me was almost as surprising as Tennessee being underneath another NCAA investigation. Your thoughts?
When I first read it, I thought it was probably too strongly worded. And then I was reminded of what Plowman did when they announced the firing of Jeremy Pruitt, when she said that it was shocking, some of the recruiting violations. And so she has been prone to hyperbole. So when I thought back to that, I wasn't surprised at how strong she worded it. I also think back to when Mack Brown had a wide receiver that the NCAA wouldn't clear, and he came out with some very harsh words about the NCAA. They finally cleared the receiver after a 4-game suspension. So I'm wondering if coming out with a strong comment like that, Caleb, to your point, it certainly gets attention. It certainly gets people to look at it and say, man, did you see what she said? And though from my perspective, I thought it might have been a little bit too strong. I get where she's coming from. Obviously, she's feel passionate about this. And if you feel like you have been wronged, which he obviously does, that can fuel the fire a little bit. It's fueled my fire when I've been accused of doing something I didn't do, kind of ticked me off, and I've responded that way. And I think a lot of people do. So I think that's where she's coming from. This is wrong. We shouldn't be accused of this. You can't retroactively punish us for rules that were not in place.
I agree with that, Caleb. And now we're told there's a lawsuit that is been filed or is going to be filed. What's the latest so we get Jimmy's take on that?
Yeah, so the Tennessee Attorney General has filed a lawsuit in conjunction with the Virginia Attorney General against the NCAA, saying that limitations on using NIL for recruiting is an antitrust violation. And basically, they are saying that you can't put stipulations on how NIL is applied. And this is the exact same lawsuit they filed 3 years ago when they basically said that you can't have any stipulations on how players get paid to begin with, which led to NIL. So they're joint filing this lawsuit. I mean, Jimmy, my question is, if they joint file, if the Supreme Court's going to rule that NIL, that not allowing NIL is a violation of the Antitrust Act, won't they also rule that regulations on NIL is a violation of the Antitrust Act?
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. So again, there may be some other parts of this investigation that I don't know about. What I know about publicly and what I've been able to find out, I don't think the NCAA has a strong case, and I think it's ludicrous to impose a penalty or to adopt rules and then apply penalties in 10 months ago for something that might happen, or a year ago, or whatever, retroactively. I just don't think that's fair. I certainly agree with Donde Plowman on that, and with the Tennessee fans on that one. That's why I'm really, and NCAA doesn't have a whole lot of teeth right now, right? So I'm going to be really curious to see where this one goes. The whole time when NIL was set up, all these folks in college athletics talked about, in the NCAA, you can't use this as a recruiting inducement. How do you get around that?
Yeah, that's.
What do you think? What do you think these guys in the portal are doing? They're putting their name in the portal to try to get the best NIL deal. That's recruiting. So you got to be an idiot to think that NIL is not going to be used in recruiting.
Jim, do you think there is any chance that Donde Plowman shot that letter off without approval from the SEC? Because the more I thought about it, I don't think so. Your thoughts? Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler, looking for affordable game day jewelry. How about the Fire Opals? Tennessee tradition. RickTerryJewelry.com. RickTerryJewelry.com. I don't think this was gone rogue by Donde Plowman. And now that we've seen lawsuits, I think it just speaks to that as well. I think she had the full support of the university, which she doesn't need because she's the chancellor. But I also believe she probably had the full support of the SEC. Thoughts?
I would think so. I don't know that she did. I was told that the UT attorneys gave her some advice, maybe helped write it, I don't know, but approved it. And then I also had a guy that's really close to the program that texted me and said, boy, she got bad advice for coming out with such a strongly worded letter. So I've had text messages saying two sides of this. I don't think she would do it without the attorneys. I don't think she would do it without, obviously, Danny White and UT being involved, those folks. To go through the SEC and Greg Sankey, he doesn't like to be blindsided. So I think he probably would have rubber stamped it or agreed with it because, look, Tennessee isn't the only one that's in this situation. You don't think Alabama and LSU and Georgia and other schools have been, and A&M, have been using NIL to help get players on their campus, either out of high school or through the transfer portal. So Greg Sankey does not want NCAA investigations of a lot of his programs retroactively. So, yes, I would certainly think he would have endorsed this letter.
Okay, I want to kick this over to Caleb. I would kick this over to Caleb, but I do want to ask you this real quick. A lot of people are jumping on Pat Forty because the Greg Schiano thing, and he is the one who broke it. I've had no issues with Pat, with Pat's reporting. I know it's kind of your mantra, like it is mine. We don't rip other media members. I've never heard you do it on the record. So off the record a lot. No, I'm kidding. But Forty, Jim, I've got no reason to think he has an axe to grind. I don't care in what position you're in. If you get that tip, you should report it.
Absolutely. It's ridiculous to blame the messenger. Did anything Pat Forty report, was any of it untrue?
No.
And the New York Times is the one that came out first with Nico. Last I looked, Pat Forty doesn't work for the New York Times. If somebody gives me a tip, whether I'm covering Tennessee or not, once I check it out, I'm going to go with it. The only reason you could get on Pat Forty if he reported something that was inaccurate. Otherwise, get your head out of the sand. He's a reporter, and it could have been anybody that got it, but he did. He's a very good reporter, and he's a friend of mine. I like the guy. Again, get off his back unless he reported something that was inaccurate.
So to break down a couple of things. So I want to get different angles on this real quick, because Donde Plowman's response is basically what you said, Jimmy. It's basically saying, how are you going to tell us, how are you going to enforce rules against us when you're changing the rules all the time and then retroactively come at us?
Right. Now,
the state of Tennessee is saying, well, these rules are stupid anyway, and there should be no rules to begin with because they're dumb. That's what would go to court. So Donde Plowman is saying these rules are unenforceable, and the state are saying that rules shouldn't exist, period. Now, then we get to, I'm with you. I think the SEC was behind it. I think the Big Ten was behind it too, because let's be honest, SEC and Big Ten member schools, they want to get away from the NCAA, and they are tired of all of this. Well, so, Jimmy, where I get is, here's a question for you, because you've been covering for a long time, because we know Florida is under a similar investigation right now. what's different about how the SEC can handle this now versus, as I'm sure you remember, in 2002 when Alabama and Kentucky both got hit with sanctions, and that was a very big black eye for the league when Rory Kramer was commissioner, and he seemed a little bit powerless to do anything about it then, didn't he?
So, Jimmy, I want you to answer that question. Please hit the like and subscribe button. We got a ton of new viewers in. Go ahead, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and turn your notifications on. Sorry to interrupt, Jim. Go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry. So you're asking me if the SEC, I'm sorry, go ahead with your question. What was it, Caleb?
What's different about, like, I think that she does, I think they do have Greg Sankey's power now.
Yeah.
What puts Greg Sankey in stronger position to back Tennessee and Florida, because I think Florida's going to join on to this lawsuit since they're under investigation, versus Rory Kramer, who was effectively powerless when Alabama and Kentucky both got slammed in 2002.
What's different is the NCAA had a lot of power. And what they said went, and nobody was challenging them. And so what are you going to do whenever they – and by the way, this is a voluntary organization. You don't have to be a member of the NCAA.
Right.
Now, if you want to play college football, you do. But the NCAA had a lot of power. And since then, it has flipped. The power is with the student athlete. The power is with basically public opinion a lot too. And so I think that you do have a lot more pushback from schools, from commissioners toward the NCAA. You got a lot more of that going on. Now, having said that, Michigan had pushback against Harbaugh, and the NCAA ended up suspending him. Michigan suspended him for 3 games, NCAA for 3 more, right? So they're not completely powerless, but they don't have basically the autonomy that they did 22 years ago. Therefore, I see a lot more people pushing back at the NCAA and winning those arguments.
Let me ask you this, Jim. I'm going to start with you, and then we're going to move on because we got to discuss how big a piece of the blame pie Spire Sports gets. But let me ask you this. Who do you think the leak is? Somebody leaked it to Pat 40.
I have no idea.
I have a theory, and so I'm going to throw this at you, and Caleb, your thoughts. I had someone tweet me way back in the Jeremy Pruitt investigation, and apparently this person had a relationship with Jeremy Pruitt. There was a screenshot. I could see his name. It was the direct message, and it was essentially a message in which I've got plenty of stuff to talk about Tennessee when this initial investigation is complete. I believe it's probably Jeremy Pruitt called up Pat 40 or called up the NCAA and got the ball rolling as terms of a potential investigation. Those are my thoughts. Speculation. I don't know.
I don't either. And I don't know if certainly he would have reason to go in that direction, but I don't know how much he knows. I don't know what he knows, how many friends he has in the athletic department that would leak stuff to him to where he would know some stuff. I will tell you this. I had a long conversation with him before the NCAA ruling, and he told me a whole bunch of stuff about what was going to come down, and he was spot on. For example, he told me Tennessee was going to get fined between $8 and $10 million, and they would buy their way out of a postseason ban. He was right.
Caleb, you've got exactly 3 seconds to tell me who the leak is because Jimmy's running out of time.
Well, no, I'm not. I think it's possible. I also think Jeremy Pruitt might be very angry that Donde Plowman gave Philip Fulmer that severance package and fired him for calls because Philip Fulmer, that's Donde Plowman's biggest mistake. Philip Fulmer never should have been able to walk away clean from what happened.
I don't think Philip Fulmer's allowed to step on campus without getting a big lump sum of cash to walk away.